Welcome to the beautiful and always crowded Innsbruck. I'm here for the annual gastronomy fair, but this time a surprise awaits us. In this year's edition, the Claymore Whisky Club, in collaboration with FAFGA, has organized an exclusive whisky lounge inside the fair. Today's special guest is the great independent bottler Antony McCallum. Now let's enjoy the presentation and some whisky, of course.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Do you all understand Scottish?
Yes, of course.
So, in a couple of weeks, I will be celebrating 30 years making whiskey. So I'll explain where I started. But you know, having a Scottish mother, I don't know if it's the same here, but when you have a Scottish mother, you start getting the taste of whiskey from your mother's breast. Is it the same here? Yep. Yeah?
Here it's with beer. Here.
Yeah. But my career in whiskey, I started 30 years ago on the Isle of Skye, on the west coast of Scotland, with the Gaelic Whisky Company, Praben na Líne. Now there is actually a distillery. When I was there 30 years ago, Skye was different. First of all, there was no bridge, so you had to go over by sea, so you had to take the boat. There was only a single track road, and normally on the track road you also met some sheep, but after the first day I arrived, the sheep always recognized me and moved from the road. If you want a trick of how not to have a problem with the sheep, you just go right up to them and you bump them with your car. Just slightly, and then they understand and they remember. Anytime I arrived, they could hear my car 10 kilometers before I arrived, and they would push from the road. On Skye, that was my first job in the whiskey, and the first project I worked on was unchill filtered whiskey. When I started 30 years ago, all the whiskies, or mostly all the whiskies except one, were chill filtered. Springbank was unchill filtered. But in the blended segment, everything was chill filtered and usually had the E150, which is caramel, Farbstoff. So the first project was to launch the first whiskey unchill filtered. Unchill filtered means, like here, you have slight cloudiness. So the whiskey you have here is called McPink, but I'm going to explain why. But first of all, what you have in the glass is unchill filtered, but also 100% natural color. So it's a natural hair. So actually on the packaging of the bottle you have, we'll go to the picture. If you see, my pink is Mary Queen of Scots. There you are here. Mary Queen of Scots, if you know, she was redhead. So I created McPink with the image of Mary Queen of Scots. After Skye, I went back down to Glasgow, where I'm still today, and I trained as a master blender. So I trained with Alistair Hart, who was the ex-master blender of White and Mackay, who then went on to train Richard Patterson before he retired. Master blender isn't something you learn at university. You can be a brewer, you can be a distiller, that you can learn at university. But master blender, you have to have a developed palate, developed nose, and then you get your knowledge from the person who did this work before you. Obviously, it has to be a combination of all three. I inherited this from my mum, who had a very strong sense of smell and palate. But I had it already as a baby. As a baby, I was always smelling. If my mum covered my arms, I would cry because I couldn't smell. And my mum couldn't understand why I was crying. As a Scottish mum, she always put you outside. We were never indoors. As a baby, we were in the pram outside. Mum said it's the same with the dogs. Dogs should never be in the house. So a dog or a baby always should be outside. That's Scottish method to make you strong. So to be a Highlander, like here. Like Herbert, where is he? So I'm going to show you how to taste as a master blender. And to show that I created McPink with the image of Mary Queen of Scots. Historically, so I said she was redhead. So first thing I look at when I extract the whiskey from the barrel is its colour, because it's natural. So I obtained this nice colour because I used for the second maturation some ruby port cask, and that gives me the redhead colour of my whiskey. Second thing you're going to check is the nose. Let's say it looks nice, but then when you get closer, it doesn't smell as good. I'll tell you why. Mary Queen of Scots was a tall lady. She was at least 1.85 meters, but she was also very sporty. She loved horse riding, fighting, going to war against the English, but also she played sport. She was the first footballer in Scotland. We found in her bedroom in Stirling Castle the oldest football in the world. So we're talking about 1560. She used to play football when our father, the king, was away from the castle with the guards of the castle. Normally a princess in that period had to be stitching or poetry or writing, but not playing football. So she was very strong. So first we're going to smell, because that's first is your visual sense and then your nose. So I tried to create the McPink, which is a blended whiskey, a mixture of 15 single malts from the northeast of Scotland, Speyside, so no turf. I tried to create the image of Mary Stuart because she was tall, slim, redhead, but also very beautiful. She was so beautiful that all the men were after her, so she could just pick the one she wanted. So in just, she had a quite short life, but in the period of being a queen, she actually had 3 husbands. which was a lot for that time. So if you smell your glass, you'll see I tried to create it tall, slim, good looking, and I call it tutti frutti. You'll see very fruity, toffee, red fruit, some honey, some light spiciness as well, orange peel, vanilla. There's lots on the nose. Now, if you want to actually see it's Mary Stuart, you have to warm your glass up. And then you're going to see appear on the side of your glass the legs of Mary Stuart. You're going to see their long legs. They start very fine because she was very tall. So like a top model. My mum was the same. She was 1 meter 80 and she was recruited when she was just 16 as a top model for Christian Dior in the 60s. But her parents said no. You go to university. So you see the long legs, but then there's a bit of calf as well. So a bit of Highlander, a bit of sportiness. And then you have the second, after the legs, you've got the crown. So you've got the crown of Mary Stuart, and then the tears, because she was more than 10 years in prison, and so she had a hard life after she was a princess and captured by her cousin. And the tears give me the length on the palette. So these tears, the longer they stay around the crown, will tell me this is going to be rich and also with quite long aftertaste. You have also a lot of legs because it's 15 single malts and 1 grain whiskey, and also non-chill filtered. So you've got a lot of oiliness. Let's go for the first kiss now with Mary Stuart. First kiss to get your primary flavours is just 1 drop. 1 single drop. So it's like a quick kiss, like that. So just take a drop from the end of your tongue. It's not a French kiss, you're not using the whole tongue. And there you're going to get some fruitiness, some honey sweetness. Almost like, you know, the love apple you get at Fun Fair. Toffee apple. So if this first kiss went well, you can go for the second kiss. Second kiss is going to be a French kiss, or we're here in Austria, so an Austrian kiss. So you're taking more. You're taking just enough to cover half of your tongue. And here you're going to get your secondary flavours. So your secondary flavours are going to be slightly more spicy. You know, she was redhead and she was a princess and she had to fight in a man's world. So if you know redheads, strong people, they can be quite spicy. So that's why there had to be a bit of spiciness in the whiskey as well. And now obviously the richness also comes from the second maturation in ruby port casks. And my casks are 10 years old. They contain 10 years of ruby port, so very mature casks, not seasoned casks like most big distilleries do. I can do this because it's a small production. Mary Stuart came from a Scottish artist, Ashley Cook. Ashley takes old images of Scotland, she superimposes them. She's a bit the Andy Warhol of Scotland. So lots of colour, lots of design. She doesn't particularly like whiskey, but she loved it when I launched it in a cocktail. And that's why I created it as well, so it's actually a whiskey that goes really well in a cocktail as well. Because you've got that sweetness as well, which goes much better in a cocktail than most whiskies. Most whiskies are too dry, and that's why I created it with this sweetness, this fruitiness. so you can create like an old-fashioned with it. The bartender that did the launch cocktail was very, very simple. He took McPink, he took some soda, he took some marmalade from Dundee, because he was from Dundee, so Dundee marmalade, so orange marmalade, and then just mixed it, and that was an easy cocktail. I think there was a bitters as well he put, I can't remember. It's on my website actually, the whole recipe. So that's McPink, 43.5%. So it's a blend with the same strength as a single malt. Now the structure, the richness, is similar to a single malt. And I achieved that by making the whiskey like we used to make it over 30 years ago, which means marriage. So actually you blend it and then you put it back for what we call the marriage of all ingredients. And then it allows them to marry together and create a lot more aromatics. The blenders today don't do it. It costs too much money and too much time. And as you know, time is money. And the supermarkets just want prices. So the big brands, they sell to supermarkets, so they make it to the price of the supermarkets. Except big brands, you know, like Johnny Walker Black or Chivas 12, they're still, you know, trying to, they have to get it to 12-year-old, they still do the marriage, but they are more expensive. Here is minimum 7 years. So first maturation individually till 5 years, and then after that an extra minimum 2 years in the port cask after marriage. Now we're going to move to a single malt, the map of Scotland. Scotland is divided into two regions. You have the lowlands in the south, and then you have the highlands in the north. In the highlands you have different regions in terms of style of whiskey. Speyside is the largest, the smallest of the regions, but the largest in terms of the number of distilleries. You have over 50 distilleries in Speyside. And why this region for so many distilleries? Because they're very smooth, they're very floral, and they mature very fast because of the climate. Very dry and very soft in terms of the landscape. So the water's very pure, like Macallan, which we tried with Marcus yesterday. So you have very pure, very soft, and gives you very nice, subtle flavours. McWarrior, we're heading to the north of the Highlands. If I say McWarrior, what does it say to you?
Strong.
Yes, like Herbert.
Highlander.
But, there's a but. On the image, I used Bonnie Prince Charlie, Charles Edward Stewart. So that's my friend artist, Simon Laurie. He normally does landscapes, but I came into his studio and I saw he had this picture of Bonnie Prince Charlie, and then that was inspiration, like I did for the McPink with Mary Stewart, to create a whiskey around this image. So it's a Highlander, but Highlander who's a prince. So there's going to be a bit of velour in the flavour. Highland single malts in the north, they aren't so many, they're just a few distilleries. The west coast islands, apart from Islay, are also included in the Highlands. And then you have Central Highland ones, which we're going to try as well. So then you can compare Northern Highland to Central Highlands. The big difference, the Northern Highland is covered in peat, torf. But in the McWarrior, the torf is only an element for filtering the water. The barley is not smoked with the torf. Therefore, the whiskey is not going to be smoky, but it's going to be rich because of that rich water. When I was on Skye, we also had peated water. And the peated water, basically when I was wanting to have a bath, I would run the bath, and by the time it was full and you had to go in the bath, it was brown, you could not see through the water. So that's how rich the peated water is. And that's what you're going to find in this whiskey. It's going to be very rich, just because of the richness of the water. How many liters of water do you need to produce 1 liter of whiskey at 43%? How many liters do you think? How many days in the year does it rain in Scotland? 180 days in the year. Yeah, but sometimes just 1 minute. You know, like here, like last night. So it does take a lot of water. 100 liters of water to produce 1 liter of whiskey. So you need a lot of water. So actually some people also ask me, should I put water in my whiskey? Well, this is actually my job to put it in the whiskey for you. So in Scotland we always say, do not put water in your whiskey, but always put whiskey in your water. You know, whiskey in Gaelic is Uisce, water of life. So that's the best water. It's water that gives you back life. So let's look at the colour. So quite similar to Mary Stuart, because first maturation in bourbon, like for the McPink, and second maturation using the same cask, the same ruby port cask. Because Bonnie Prince Charlie was like his great-great-grandmother, he was also redhead. That's why I had to use the same casks. Slightly lighter, you know, maybe slightly more reddy brown, because also it spent a little bit more time in the cask. So then, because these are French oak port casks, so then it'll take a slightly darker, more browny with the extra 1 year. So it's 4 years in bourbon, and then minimum 3 years in the ruby port. The legs, if you have a look, should appear. And there should be less legs, because there now you're a single malt. Whereas before you were a blended Scotch with 15 single malts. So the leg starts quite fine and then gets thicker, so it's got a bit of calf towards the end, which means the aromas are going to start quite straight and then they're going to open up. And then the tears, they're coming down a bit faster than on McPink. So it's going to be oily, but not too oily. On the nose, richer, more like a Christmas cake, fruit cake. Raisins, apricots, almonds. There's a wee bit of spiciness, a bit of ginger spice towards the back of it. Let's go for our first kiss. It's maybe the first time you kiss a prince. I mean, maybe your husband's a prince, but... We'll say your husband's the prince of the cars. Yep. So very, very soft, a bit more oily as well. You know, it's normal because you're in a single malt. So 100% malted barley, and the malted barley is the richest of all the cereals for distilling. It's called the most noble cereal for distilling. Let's go for the Austrian kiss. Use your tongue. They have more richness, like toffee and even some chocolate notes. And then a wee bit drier, and then some peppery spices. And then nice, watery, mouth-watering aftertaste. A good whiskey shouldn't burn. You know, if it burns, then leave it in the barrel. Wait. Or else it's maybe too high a strength. In this range, we're always at 43.5. The 0.5, Punkte 5, is my signature. 5 is my number. So all the artists at work with me in terms of me choosing the art are known artists in Scotland from the Glasgow School of Art, which is quite famous worldwide. But obviously it's Scotland, so we think it's worldwide famous, but not always. So actually, the fact that I put it on the label, I'm also trying to promote these Scottish artists so they're better known internationally. So it's a collaboration between me and the artist. So you see something more fruity, more round, but some spiciness as well, so some Highlander character, but also some elegance of a prince. So we're going to carry on our journey, but this time we're going to go to the islands. The islands that are also part of the Highlands, plus an extra one which is called Islay, which is known for its very, very peaty whiskies. I've called this one Mac O'Isles. What does Mac mean? So all my brands so far start with Mac. My name is McCallum, not McAllen, like your whiskey. This is a family name. It's one of the oldest families in Scotland. If we go back to the... So, this is the real coat of arms of the clan, but as one of the oldest royal families of Scotland, because we were the first kings of Scotland. It's our clan that created the Kingdom of Scotland back in 1080. Before that, Scotland was divided into 3 tribes. There were the Scots, the Picts, and then a smaller tribe, which were the Celts, which maybe came from Austria. Malcolm I of Scotland tried to unite both tribes. He didn't manage. Malcolm II then married the princess of the Picts and then created the Kingdom of Scotland. And then Malcolm III made Scotland even bigger because he then married an English princess from the south of Scotland. North of England. So then he took the whole north of England as well within the Kingdom of Scotland. And actually my bottles come from the north of England because we don't have any specialty glass makers. And actually my glass maker is in the north of England, but he's Austrian. So something Austrian in my product as well. So these 3 kingdoms, so this is actually my own coat of arms, but for the brand. So as one of the oldest families in Scotland, I can apply to have my own coat of arms for the business because of our ancestry in Scotland. So there's, we're not mixing up business with the original clan. So it's separate. It has all the elements of the clan, so the stag, the stars, and then this part is also from the original clan crest. But the barrels obviously are not.
The quaich. What about the quaich?
The quaich either is more modern. So the quaich is what we use for drinking whiskey. It depended where you were in Scotland, because when I was in Skye, Clan MacLeod of MacLeod, to become a chieftain, so the head of the clan, there was one rule. So their ancestors were actually Norse. So it was like a Norwegian king or prince. And they had a horn, so a Viking horn, and to be able to become clan chief of MacLeod, you had to be able to drink 1 litre of claret in that horn. So you'd fill it with 1 litre of wine, red wine, and you had to drink it in one go. If you couldn't drink it in one go, you couldn't be the clan chief. But you see, in our clan it was probably different. That's just wine, 12-13%. In our clan you have to do the same, but with whiskey. That's why we were the kings of Scotland. So we'll go back to Maco Isles. So Maco Isles, I named it after my great-great-grandfather. So our ancestral land are the whole west coast of Scotland, and Malcolm McCallum, they lived on the Isle of Bute, which is north of Arran. He had his own boat, and he used to travel around the islands of Scotland and recovered the barrels from all the distilleries in the islands and take them back to Glasgow to the blending houses. And then what often happened, if you know the weather on the west coast of Scotland, lots of wind, often lots of rain, and it quite often happened because of this wind and rain and heavy seas, there would be sometimes a barrel fell into the sea. Well, that was the official version, but generally that barrel was in the house. And that's how, as babies, we got the taste of whiskey. Because my great-great-granny, the regime we had in the islands, there's no hospital. There's no pharmacy. We're talking about over 100 years ago. There was nothing like that. So actually you needed a distillery, because that was, and on Bute, they didn't have any distillery, or they might have had illegal ones back 100 years ago. But we had the natural medicine in the house. And actually, if you smell this, you'll smell it doesn't smell like whiskey. It smells like medicine. Could be a cream, or it could be as you open up the door to a hospital. That's why at the time, 100 years ago, there weren't any hospitals in these islands. So that's why it was important to have this as pure medicine in your house. So in Scotland, we have a saying, is 5 drams a day keeps the doctor away. This is actually quite a small dram, but it's just because it's a tasting, it's not the doctor's surgery today. And this medicine works, and I'm not just saying that as some silly story, is that I can prove it, because if you take the reports of the island of Bute, 100 years ago, she died, and she was 99 years and 8 months. So you see the 5 drams a day worked quite well. Normally all these years ago, people didn't live so long. So what I tried to do is recreating a recipe from my great-great-grandfather. So I took single malt from Islay, so peated, then the island facing, which is unpeated and grassy, then one further north in Mull, which is salty, and then finish in Orkney with a whiskey which is very heathery peat, slightly peated. You'll know what I'm talking about. And then I blend them together, obviously not equal proportions because the recipe is my secret recipe. Rudy tried to make me drink a lot, see if I could tell him what the recipe was. It never works with a Scotsman. And then I put the 4 different malts into a rum barrel. Again, I was the pioneer to use different types of barrels. When I started 30 years ago, I was told by master blenders, in Scotland we are very traditional. We only use bourbon, sherry, port, sometimes Madeira, but there aren't many Madeira casks around. So when I was younger, I was a swimmer. So in the winter time, I used to go training in the Caribbean. So between my 4 hours training sessions, morning and afternoon and evening, you know, to get a bit of energy, you had to find something local. So then you had to experiment with the local rums. So I had some knowledge of rum, and when I started in the whiskey, I thought, well, that's a bit boring. Only bourbon, only sherry, only Madeira or port. I was like, sherry or port is English wine actually. So I'd like something a bit more exotic. So I experimented with the rum casks. And then after I launched, people loved it. I did some Kalila and rum. And then other companies copied me. Because people would say, wow, this is really great. So that's why I use the rum casks also to give some notes of exotic fruit. So if you smell it, you'll get a bit of passion fruit. And I love passion fruit. So that's why I tried to reproduce here is the rum, the passion fruit, in terms of the flavors. And then on the palate, you get a bit of everything. So you get a bit of saltiness, a bit of smokiness, a bit of exotic fruit, and then very, very soft. The second kiss is more smoky. So it's good for if you want to try something a bit smoky without it being overly peaty. So just like a light smokiness. So this is like the vintage series. The vintage series are really single or double casks. So very, very small releases. Hand-pick casks. The one I have here is Blair Athol. Blair Athol is very, very old distillery. So it's here in the central of the Highlands. So we would classify that more as like Southern Highlands, Central Southern Highlands. Just south of the village of Pitlochry. Pitlochry, you'll find 2 distilleries. There's Edradure, which is supposedly the smallest distillery originally in Scotland, but that's disputable. You know, because they're saying we're the smallest, but that was because they were then licensed. The problem is in Scotland, distilleries were like farms, and most farms were distilling illicitly. You know, we didn't like paying taxes to the Scottish English king. Because after Mary Stuart, basically the son of Mary became King of Scotland and England. And the English didn't really like a Scottish king, so to show that he was helping the Kingdom of England, he then imposed taxes on the Scots for the distillation. Blair Athol is one of these distilleries that's not very well known because it's one of these single malts is used essentially for blending. So it's one of the key malts for like Bell's whiskey, which used to be one of the best-selling whiskies in Scotland. But then they made a marketing mistake. Must be about 26 years ago, just after I started, the owners decided to get rid of all the sales guys who were going around all the pubs in Scotland and the Highlands, who were then promoting it. The old style, you went to the pub, you spent some drinking, some eating, and I said, this is costing us too much money. Modern marketing is telemarketing. So the pubs can just phone up and then we give them some discounts so we don't have to pay sales guys. The big mistake they did, they fired all the staff in Scotland and opened up a call centre in England. I think it was just outside London, so it's even worse. Because actually us Scots, when we phone up, that part, we don't even understand what they're saying. Same when we get calls from the the south of England. North of England is fine, we understand them. But from the centre, it's very hard to understand. So then actually, Marcus's brand, Famous Grouse, became the biggest brand in Scotland. Because that was local and they still had local people. So in Scotland it's important for the people to have some local people promoting, and then we know it's a local product. My work as a master blender is also to choose the strength of each cask. So actually of this Blair Athol, I did two different casks. This one, 11-year-old, the other one was 11-year-old as well. Both first fill bourbon, both distilled on the same day, but they were different in character. This one I bottled at almost natural strength, 55.5. I told you 5 is my lucky number, or my special number. So this is my ultimate strength. The other cask was a bit different in character, and I bottled that one at 46.5. It's quite a difference in terms of strength. But that's my job as a master blender, is to find the equilibrium between each barrel. So put some water, reduce gradually, and find at what strength you get the maximum flavour. So it can be a higher strength, it can be a middle strength around 50%, or it can be 46.5. Sometimes it can be lower if it's a very old barrel. So it's not always, so I say ultimate strength is 5, but if it's a special barrel, like that in 26, here the strength is 47.8, because of its natural reduction. And that was perfect for an old whiskey. Old whiskey, if you add more water when it's already matured so long, you can also just lose it. So here at Pitlochie, the water actually, you can see the small stream goes through the distillery. And it's very, very pure water. And actually that purity of the water, you can already get it on the nose. Very clean nose. You get also a bit of vanilla because it was first fill bourbon, so which is a classic maturation today for whiskey. Bourbon barrels are used only once for making bourbon, therefore they're easy cask to get for Scotland, which has a big production of whiskey. Also in terms of flavours, it's very, very easy flavours, so vanilla, floral note, white fruit note, so very easy. But unfortunately it doesn't give much colour. It's already given the colour to the bourbon. So if you want to get nitrous colours like McCallum, then that's why they use also sherry cask, because you get a dark colour, but also different flavours from the sherry. Here you're going to get very, as I say, floral notes, vanilla notes. So you'll see in your first kiss the objective is not for it to burn. if it's a higher strength, you should be able to drink it without adding water. Some people the other day were saying, should I put a few drops? Some people put a few drops of water in their whiskey. That is fine if you just want to smell it. It opens up the nose, but then it creates a disequilibrium on the palate. When you're adding water to whiskey, you should wait at least 48 hours. So it means if you add a few drops, then you should wait 48 hours before drinking it. If you want it to be at 100% of its potential.
That's why I never put water in it.
That's why we say in Scottish, only put whiskey to your water and don't put water to your whiskey. Because that's my job, to put it in, and then after that when you get the bottle it's already at the right strength. See, the first kiss is very rich, very oily. Then you just get a little bit of spiciness toward the end, but it's very, very silky smooth at 55.5. And that's the way it should be at higher strength. Second kiss gets a bit richer, so you're getting more like gingerbread notes, then more vanilla, custard. So you see the Blair Athol's very round, very smooth, bit of character from the Highlands, but you know, a good balance in terms of the strength versus the aromas. Now we're going to McPeat. Peat in German is Turf. Torf. Peat, depending where it comes from, will give different flavours to the whiskey. If it's from the islands, from the sea, it's decomposed from algae. You know, back 400-500 years ago, we would use the algae coming in from the sea to fertilise the land. So that would then decompose, fertilise the fields, and then that's good for, you know, your barley growing. So it's a good rich soil. But because you're using algae, that is also in the structure of the land. And then the rain comes, filters it, and that's your water. So your water is filtered by that peat, which used to be salty and with seaweed. If you're in the Highlands, you're very far away from the sea. So there is just peat from what was there. So 500-600 years ago, 700 years ago, there would have been a lot of trees. Today there aren't so many trees. But back 700 years ago, there were many trees. So then leaves, the heather from the land as well, and that would decompose, so that would be a different type of peat. So depending on the structure of the peat, you're going to have different flavours of smoke, and it's that peat that's burnt to smoke the barley, and that's that smokiness of the smoked barley that goes into the beer, making it a smoky beer, and that smoky beer turns into a smoky alcohol. And that's what will give these flavours of smoke in your glass. And then you will smell it and you'll see, well, that is no longer whiskey. So that's again pure Scottish medicine. So you see on the nose is, I'm getting a bit of banana, and then some herbal notes, or maybe some grapefruit, banana and grapefruit. So when I was on Skye, so we had Talisker, because we were just a blender and bottler, like what I am today. On Skye, the only distillery was Talisker. And the first night, because you know when you're working in an island like Skye, there isn't much to do after work. The only thing you have is the pub, unless you want to go and swim in the sea, you know, at 15 degrees or less. So in the pub, the first thing that surprised me is that there was no Talisker behind the bar. And yet that's the only distillery, so I was like surprised, I was like, that's strange. So the old guy at the village was Kinyoch. And so I asked Kinyoch, because he wanted to talk to me because I was the new guy in town. So he was next to me, wanted to know where I came from, so he could tell the whole village my story. So I said, Kinyoch, I said, why is there no Talisker here? That's the only distillery on the island. He says, no. Have you tried it? Did you smell it? I said, yeah, it's very medicinal. Smells like opening up or going into a theatre, you know, a operation theatre in a hospital. He said, exactly. He says, nobody wants to be drinking at hospital. I says, okay, I understand. I says, so nobody has Talisker in the island? I never said that. So I said, so how do you use Talisker if you have it in the house? I said, do you use it to wash the windows or? No. He says, you know when you have a sore throat? I says, aye. He said, well, when you have a sore throat, he says, this is what you do. And I says, Kinyoch, I says, do you swallow like I just did? I says, or do you spit? He says, well, if you've got an Englishman beside you, you spit. I says, if not, you swallow. And I says, Kinyoch, I says, is there any other reason, you know, you would take some of it? He says, well, yes. He says, if it's worse than a sore throat, if you've got a temperature, you've got achy bones, and you feel really tired and not well, then you have to go to the next level. So then, you have them here, I've seen them before, pint of beer, half a litre, 10 centilitres, McPeat. Then it says you need a bit of vitamin C. So you take the juice of an orange, get your vitamin C. And then we have something very special in the Highlands of Scotland. You probably have here as well in Austria, because I think you have heather as well. We have the heather honey, the Highland heather honey, and that's the strongest, most medicinal honey you can get. If you have an open wound, you put it on several days and the wound's gone. It's healed. Does the same if you take some. So, big tablespoon of heather honey. And then that in your pint and the rest hot water. And then you stir, and then you sit in your sofa and drink slowly. And after your half litre, and we call that a hot toddy, if you can get up, you go to bed. If not, you unroll your kilt and put it over you, like the Highlands does it, and sleep. And I swear, on Skye there was no pharmacy, there was no doctor where I was. So that was the only thing we had. So I had no choice but to try it as well. And I swear it works. If it's a really, really bad cold, bad flu, then normally you only have to repeat it once. So if you wake up and you're not well, you have what we have for breakfast. And I know you have it as well because I saw it in the breakfast here in Austria. So you have porridge. Porridge. And in Scotland, porridge is part of your 5 a day, so porridge doesn't have much flavour, so you always put whiskey in your porridge in the morning. And then after your whiskey flavoured porridge, then you have your second hot toddy, if you're still not unwell. And go back to bed. So for the last one, we're going to go to one of my favourite distilleries. I have obviously more than one. because I like to vary the pleasures. I guess you're all the same. You know, it's never good to just have one bottle of whiskey at home, because depending on your mood, depending on the weather, we all like different things at different moments. So Kolila is a very special distillery. I like it because it's peaty, but it's also got a lot of elegance. So there's some slight sweetness in Kolila, and probably because of its geographical situation on Islay. It's on the east coast of the island, and therefore it's not open to the wild winds of the Atlantic Ocean. So it's more protected. It's also the largest distillery on the island, and has a beautiful view. If you get into the still room, then you have a beautiful view over Isla Jura, the Paps of Jura. The interesting thing about Kolila, you can have different also levels of peat. So depending on the distillation, it can be very peaty, it can be more lightly peated. So then there's also a flavour for different people depending on the type of Kolila. So this one you're going to get is a special one as well.
For you.
Thank you. You'll see from its lovely colour, if you look at it, you're like, maybe it's sherry. But it isn't. Again, I was a pioneer in using wine casks. And actually, these bottles, these labels of my vintages are called the older lines. Do you know what the older lines is? If you remember your history of Scotland, although it's not your history, but if you know a film with William Wallace, yep. Braveheart, after he was killed, the king to succeed him was Robert the Bruce. And so to protect Scotland, Robert the Bruce signed an agreement with France, which is known as the Older Lines. And so the Older Lines between Scotland and France meant that if Scotland was attacked by the English, the French attacked the English. And if the English attacked the French, the Scots attacked the English. So France was always caught in a sandwich. So I think that's where the word sandwich comes from the Older Lines between Scotland and France. And the French call the English roast beef. So it's probably a roast beef sandwich. So during that whole period, and if we go even back further or forward to Mary Queen of Scots, she was also half French because her mother was French. Scottish king was Scottish, and then to secure that Older Lines through the generations, there was also a linkage between the royal families, or the noble families of Scotland and France. So Mary Queen of Scots was half French, half Scottish. I'm also half French, half Scottish. So I follow the tradition of the Older Lines. And therefore I also have a knowledge of wines. And that's why I brought out the series, the Older Lines, where you'll have a double maturation of traditional bourbon casks and then the French wine casks. Because in those times, the Scots were drinking French wine. They weren't drinking sherry, they weren't drinking port, that was the English wine. So when these wine barrels, which arrived by sea from France, were drunk, then these barrels were used for maturing whiskey. So these were the traditional barrels used when the whiskey wasn't drunk. Most of it was drunk as white spirit, as Descubert. So it was only some of the whiskey was then matured in the empty wine barrels from France, and then gave this lovely colour. but also added softness, fruitiness, and roundness. And that's what I tried to recreate using these barrels. I have a secret on how I prepare the barrels, so I'm not going to share it on camera. That's the secret of a master blender, how I use the barrels. But I only work with small wine producers directly, whom I've tried the wine, and mostly they're organic, also wine casks. Doesn't make the whiskey organic, because the distillate would need to be organic. But part of the production means it's also organic. If you think that the barrel will give about 50% of the flavour. So it's very important, the quality of the barrel. So here's a Kalila 13 in a Grave cask. You know what Grave wine is? So you can have white or you can have red. From the colour, this is red. Grave is a Bordeaux wine. And it's a small lady producer that I get my barrels from. So it gives me that beautiful colour. And then on the nose, you're going to get some smoky, but almost like smoky Christmas cake. So there you get more of the smokiness, but it's still very soft, very round. Here we're at 46.5%. So in this last one, we're going to do the toast of Islay. So for that, you need to be standing. Now here we can't do it, but normally in the tradition, you also have to be standing on the chair and then the next foot on the table. That's the test to see if you can still go home or not. But here we don't have the chairs or the tables for it. Slàinte mhath.